on The Sinister Secret of Saltmarsh by Dave J. Browne with Don Turnbull, who is the developer and writes the introduction. And this was in 1981, the first product from TSR Hobbies UK, following up, I guess, the Fiend Folio, which was their Monsters. But that wasn't TSR UK. It was just their product, then published in America. And this was the first of three, followed by by Danger at Dunwater, and then The Final Enemy. That's U1 to 3, and then really followed up again by UK 1 to 6 modules under the UK code anyway, and also by a few differently coded modules, ones for the B series, for instance, by this UK group of authors, some of whom later were involved again. They have been involved somewhat, but were later involved again in Games Workshop with Warhammer Fantasy, a couple of them. Yeah, this was the first thing coming out under their aegis. And Don Turnbull talks about the fact there is going to be this different vibe, and he talks about different spelling and idiom, but there's generally considered that's kind of representative of a different vibe, a different aesthetic, the slightly different thing going on with UK adventures of that era. And many of these adventures are good in the U series, the UK series, and the B series. This is generally considered, I think, the best, apart from Night's Dark Terror, maybe B10. But here, there's a haunted house near Saltmarsh. That's how the campaign starts. The linked series of adventures start, and essentially surface dwellers, the adventurers, get caught up more and more into this plot by underwater creatures to do bad things to people on the surface, as they always want to do. And so, you get caught into that. That's the basic principle, and you go, here you're on the surface, and then you're going somewhere else, and then you're going finally to fight Sargin, Sharkmen. Like, the point is, it gets deeper. Yeah, U1 is, as I said, generally considered the best. And I think there's a lot to be said for it as an all-time classic, kind of top 10 adventure, AD&D adventure kind of discussion. It's for levels 1 to 3, let's say second-ish. There's some challenging encounters. It's a bit like, and T1 Village of Homeland has presentation issues to do with how Gary presents it, really. But obviously that kind of, when you really think about it, that makes sense. This thing is a second-ish level adventure, and this is similar, though it's not as harsh. But basically the idea is there's this haunted house. An alchemist lived there. He doesn't anymore. He's dead. He's disappeared, but there is a haunting. And there's ghosts, and people were scared to go there. But it turns out this is actually an illusion, literally magical illusions that create this to cover the use of the secret cove underneath the house as part of a smuggling operation. To smuggle weapons, amongst other things, presumably, but weapons which eventually at this point are going to lizard men, who are at Dunwater, you deal with in U2, and so on and so forth, all this stuff. It comes with two mini adventures, it says, inside, and that's one thing, is it is not ungenerous for the kind of the variety of stuff you have that you can also adapt. It's got a 30 area haunted house, and then the Sea Ghost, the ship, is 16 areas. The Sea Ghost, in some ways, though correctly and intelligently, and like Bruce Cordell's ghost ship, actual ghost ship in that case, module, it treats the ship as a dungeon at some level, but in both cases, in the Sea Ghost, in the ship, it's very much a base assault. Haunted house is slightly different because the upper levels, you're mostly dealing with other stuff that isn't the pirates. So yeah, it starts with, apart from a picture of you're fighting a pirate on the cover, it starts with a variety of introductions, a preface, an introduction, the town of Saltmarsh, the legend, general notes. So yeah, you're taking 4 pages to set up. It is a 32-page module, including 2 pages of illustration and an intentionally blank page. So, that sounds bad, actually, in a sense. You're like, oh, that's a lot. But it's used basically quite well. If anything, I always felt like because the town of Saltmarsh, we're told, basically you need to make up the town council, other prominent members, a map, where they stay, what the places of worship are. You have to create this as a campaign locale. If you're, in any context, any kind of adventure, but particularly if you're going to be there. And the book doesn't provide that. more or less, actually the most substantive criticism I'd make is you can imbalance it towards the Village of Hamlet side, where you're like, man, it'd be nice to have more dungeons and fewer houses. But here it definitely goes the other way of look. There's a town here, you hear rumours. It does suggest that there'd be lots of small towns in the 14th century in England with a population of about 2,000. And that's very slight objection from a historical point of view. But that's pretty irrelevant, isn't it? The legend is, the ghost story. That's what people hear. And then it's saying what's going on and and this is, the general notes are just how we're going to present stuff. Then you go into the haunted house. And I do have a note. I always enjoy these from second hand. The adventure begins on 24 patch walls, CY 576, in pencil. So that's nice little hand me down. Preamble. You could introduce things in the following way, and it gives several points. And this is, I think, there's an interesting thing here that how were these scenarios used originally? Some of them were made for publication, but some were organic, and so they will have just fit into a campaign that existed or been dropped in a particular way as a campaign starter. And I always wonder about that kind of. It's more obvious in TSR products where there's all the way from 1978 or whatever through to 2000. I'm thinking about the second edition, the AD&D era, basically. You do run into this regular thing where you're reading a module and it says ways you could fit this into your campaign. Obviously, if it's an organic thing, it's in the original context, it was easy to put in because the DM was like, oh, well, that just makes sense. Here it's saying, well, this is assuming that your players have to be either forced to do an adventure or it's a new game. And I think that's, a slightly different assumption, but it's still odd when you think about it. And I realise that when I write adventures, put them on Patreon, I will be like, these were a couple of hooks you could put in. Obviously, hooks are not bad, but it just made me think, there's something weird about the fact that you can see TSR as like, please give a whole path to ensure the players turn up and play this adventure because we're selling them the book. You've got to make them think that they might use it. You've then got the description of the house, the wandering monsters, upstairs, the goblins who have found it, the giant rats, giant weasel, giant ants. And then you get into essentially the upper areas. The upper two stories are a dungeon. There are no pirates up there. There is an assassin who's part of this officially idiotic plan by the smuggler's ally in Saltmarsh, who sent him there to be found. He's like, I've been kidnapped, but who's found by the PCs, and that kind of actually might make the PCs think, oh wait, maybe there's something more going on here than ghosts. That's not the plan, but it puts the assassin in a position to kill one of them. It's intentionally a bungle. It's quite well done actually. But yeah, this is just post there. There's potentially there's nothing of value in bedroom 11 or 12, but there's a valueless crystal in 13, so that all kind of sucks. But in 14 you can fall through, and this is a bad run of rooms to pick up, but 14 you can drop through the floor. 15 you find Ned Shakeshaft, the assassin. 16, that bedroom. Well, one sheet toward the bottom of a bundle of clothes is a clerical scroll of hold person, and in a cavity under a floorboard there is a small leather bag containing 4 small diamonds, value 25 GP each. So you're getting bits and pieces. There's a couple of rings of protection, which I know, given how valuable XP-wise the ring of protection is, even if kept, the fact there are 2, I know I put rings of protection fairly generously at low levels in AD&D when I'm designing. I think partly because it is a reasonable way of giving a party an item they need to make sure they recognise as magic. They don't just sell. But also, so they need to be using detect magic and stuff. But also, it gives them a flexible option of backing up a fighter or giving the wizard, the MU, something, a valuable point of AC. It's a genuine utility item in a party at low level, in a way that I guess a sword +1 kind of is, but say chainmail +1 is much more marginal. Only 2 classes are going to use it, for instance. Even the sword, of course, is limited, but you know what I mean. Anyway, so yeah, it's solid. It's nothing crazily exciting. Like, man, this just blows my mind. I mean, once perhaps a fine guest bedroom, this is now decayed like the rest of the house. Wow. But what it's accomplishing is just the sense of this actual space, and there's these magic mouths that function as illusions, as fear spells if the DM wants them to. And there's a bunch of minor poison. There's like a spider who incapacitates for 1d6 hours. Giant centipedes with enfeeblement. There's another spider who I think makes you fall asleep for 4d6 hours maybe, or something like that. Maybe 2d4. I don't know, but like some number of hours. And that's interesting because, again, you're assuming these are first and second level characters coming in, and you're putting a lot of poison out there, but it's intentionally pushing to use this as an additional obstacle, not like, oh, there's just millions of save or die spiders. Nothing wrong with an occasional save or die spider, but the point is, poison is used as a way to attack the character sheet in a way that's non-lethal, but it wastes time. It creates an opportunity for encounters when you're not at full strength. Just very basic dungeon craft. So it feels like a place you could go to. It has these thematically appropriate things, and the whole theme with the magic mouths that kind of are like ghosts, and the monsters and stuff, that all works. And it's got good challenge. The treasure is solid. It's okay. It's not incredibly generous. Just again to go through, gold earring worth 20, small earth pouch containing an amethyst worth 120. Some books worth 150 GP, but not in Saltmarsh, so they're worth each. So, you know, it's not insanely generous, but then the danger, actually the biggest danger is, apart from Ned Shakeshaft using Assassinate on you, is falling through the floor at some point. So yeah, then you go down, and you're like, great. So just to, you know, there's your haunted house map. You can see that's the main two floors, and that's the cellars. And the cellars are what's occupied. And you can see, I think there, you can see, so that top room, room 20, is the cellar you come down into, and then it has a secret door into a larger suite of rooms which are being used. So the wine cellar has a dead fighting man. I think you found one or two dead corpses upstairs of adventurers too, and he's got plate mail +1, and he's got an emerald worth 250 in the hollow heel of his right boot. This is good juicy stuff actually. Plate mail +1 particularly. Remember that's AC1 base. It's the same as field plate, and some money. So you know it's good. It is infested with rock grubs. Rock grubs are a universal challenge. Because of the fact again, it's an attack the character sheet thing. Their percentage is based on AC, so good AC, good armor AC does screw around with that and limit the chance of exposure. But they can attack anyone from 1st to 20th level, and they can kill without needing to do tons of damage because it's a timed kill. So yeah, good separate design that requires burning, so you take damage yourself, or cure disease. You might well be choosing to be knocked out via damage from fire so as not to die from the rock grubs. They're only 1 HP, so it's guaranteed, you know. But yes, you need to detect a secret door, and yeah, that's the that. Then you need to go in there, and then you have a second cellar, 21. Which is essentially, you know, this is when Shakeshaft will attack, if not before. And this is basically just their storage room. And there is a smuggler guard, and then yeah, you can go to other rooms. There are 3 other rooms in the cellars, and then you get into the caves. And the cellars, the most exciting thing, there's the thing where it's the smuggler leader's room, and then beyond that there's a locked room. Next to that there's a locked room with some skeletons in it, which the pirates have never gone back into. That guards the secret door into the alchemist laboratory. And so here's another thing to really praise. I'd say the maps, by the way, we want to talk about are loopy-doopying. Houses with multiple stairways are loopy-doopied from the off, and that works. But the cellars aren't. and that there's kind of one loop in the caves, but it doesn't matter because the purpose is not like you use loops in a dungeon so as to create either mapping difficulty or choice matrix. You know, the idea that you can be like, okay, this is a better option than this. The clues here suggest we might be able to deal with this. We can't deal with that other side. That kind of thing. Or maybe we can bypass the enemy by sneaking through the kind of cramped tunnels, but maybe there's something awful in the cramped tunnels. Anyway, you get the idea. You don't need it everywhere. And here it's just like, look, this is just a house. You go down to the cellars. The house has a few dangers in it. The most dangerous thing, pretty much, they're sturges. They're actually dangerous. There's sturges. There's an assassin who won't attack you immediately. And you can fall down through a hole, which is probably quite dangerous. Other than that, you're messing around, running a risk of running into some extra monsters who might hurt you, getting slowed down, wasting resources, and then you go down to the cellar. And yeah, but each stage of this is flavourful. It kind of feels like, oh yes, here's the haunted house. What's happening? There's a thing screaming at me. When will people work out it's an illusion? That's interesting, isn't it? Who's this adventurer here that's been killed? Why are there goblins here? Are they the people who are causing all the trouble? No, they're not. They're a red herring. And then the treasure you're finding, you know, it's useful but also increasingly interesting. You go down and you've got, you've got Sambalat's spellbook and some spare items. And then if you get all the way through to the laboratory, which is a nice little place, you've got he's been able to make items into gold, pure gold. So there's a pure gold rose, pure gold skull, a pure gold skull. There is a cursed stone. There's a book on the secret of the philosopher's stone. Yeah, it's just quite flavourful. It's nothing to do with the rest of it. It's something. It takes a good piece of advice that you can usually have unconnected. They've hopefully kind of context, story, inverted commas, logical areas connected into everything. Then you've got your passages and caverns, and this is where Sambalat and some gnolls are, and you have a bit of classic art. Look at that. And there's a boat and stuff. It becomes clear you can, you know, the players, and it is a thing that's said a couple of times, both here and at the end. You as the DM have to decide what to do with moron players. And it says, look, you may need to kind of hold their hands to get them onto the next thing, or not. And it's an interesting thing. It reminds me of the end of Dawn of the Overmind by Bruce Cordell, where he's like, hey, look, you know, you may not want to end the campaign on with defeat. Maybe there's some way. If the players lose, then maybe you need to give them a way out. And he says, but just imagine they did lose. Let's talk about what you could do as a continuing campaign. You can tell his preferences for why not let the consequences happen. Here, there's like we know we need you to buy U2 and U3. But you should consider, if your players really don't pick up all the clues they've been given about why there's people living in a cellar, and there's gnolls, and there's a boat, and there's potentially proof of signalling equipment and code, things like that. Various things you might find. If they can't work it out, maybe that's fine. They just go and do something else. But they should work it out. And then part 2, the Sea Ghost, has a whole thing where, like, for instance, you are given a small boat to use in whichever way you want to try to find out who the smugglers are talking to. And you're given a crew of 2 excise men, a corporal and a private of the excise, and they come and help you. And they'll fight with you, and they'll guard the ship, that kind of thing. And then it says, look, now you need to deal with they're going to eventually, assuming they're not completely stupid again, maybe they will be, but they'll find the Sea Ghost. They're going to try to sneak in. There's ways to sneak in. It's because the crew on the deck are facing inland. The lights are facing inland, so maybe you could sneak around. Maybe you could do something else. Maybe you could attack the front. Surrender by the, it talks about, well, how do you win this scenario? Are you going to kill everyone? What is the objective here? Well, you're trying to defeat them and find out what they're doing. Okay, and then this is how your players might be able to win this. Random encounters, and it cross-references the encounter and where those NPCs normally are, so you can cross them off elsewhere. This is just good usability. In 1981, you have a module that has, on the whole, mastered the kinds of information you actually need at the table. you can have the endless layout wars, but actually most of these things are solved problems. It's just about aesthetics beyond that. Just for reference, there is the table of the encounter table, and there's another cool illustration. Then there's a key anyway, and it turns out there's lizard men. You might need to fight them. There was one thing there. I'll just observe. It's the lizard men's quarters. It makes the point, because this is a 10-foot room. Weapons with length more than 3 feet won't be able to be used, and this sounds reasonable, and it's obviously a wargamey thing. I think it's something I immediately think what will happen is I am happy. I will have that mapped. If I'm playing it in person, it'll be on a map with Fog of War revealed. If not, the players will discover it, and there'll be described dimensions, and it will take 3 lizard men plus 1 person, or maybe 2 small PCs like a gnome and a halfling, and then possibly someone might be able to use a spear, but the door and stuff probably make that awkward. So actually, I'm like, I'm not that worried about it. I suppose if someone's saying, the point is people shouldn't be using their all pikes in dungeons anyway, on the whole. So you can penalise them if they do, but yeah. There is a wizard, a magic user on the boat. So you've got a 3rd spell book there. So your players can pick up a lot of potential extra spells, including Animate Dead, Magic Missile, Sleep, Web, things like that. The captain's cabin. There are stats for each of the major members of the crew, the 3 leaders plus the crew, and there's kind of some characteristics there. There's just a bit of flavour, all fairly tightly contained. It's difficult. This is a bit like The Alchemist is secret bonus content. So is the secret prison cell on the Sea Ghost, which is, it should be said, the kind of thing that can be deduced. This is a fun thing. It's 14. So 14 and 15 are at the back on the hold level. And if your players are mapping meticulously, they will know there is a cavity there and they'll search for it. So there's just a good test, and those things 14 and 15 are the secret cache, mostly with weapons, but that hints towards the lizard men, and a secret prison cell. And that gives you a sea elf ally who will join you. The PC should play in the future if needs be, his people live nearby, and he knows about some of what's going on. And he's a 3rd level fighter thief, so he's an elf fighter thief, which is fun. But yeah, by the way, you can see again, people will recognise the hark forward to the Cordell Sahudin trilogy, where you rescue. In that case, you rescue a sea elf from Sahugin directly. But yeah, so on and so forth. Treasure rules about things about treasure. Conclusion of the adventure. An appendix which has a plot précis, order of battle for the haunted house, order of battle for the Sea Ghost. Extra information about each. So the Sea Ghost, 2 of the excise men and fishing boat people, Will Stoutley and Tom Stoutley, Sandblatt's parchment and signalling system, and the character roster for PCs, which is actually it's interesting. It doesn't have a gnome often character, but a lot of character rosters lack gnomes. This has every other PHP race. And it has some fun. It's interesting the way they go. So the halfling and the half orc are both thieves, so things they can level into reasonably. The dwarf, the half elf, and one elf are one dwarf, the half elf, and one elf are multi-classed and give you cleric magic user, fighter magic user, and fighter thief. You're talking about a useful array of things, and then you have a bit of everything else. There's one paladin, one ranger, one illusionist. So on and so forth, and there's a druid as well, Radric the druid, and it gives you all and it gives them each a magic item basically. So for instance, 12 Astanon has a wand of enemy detection, 2d6 plus 5 charges, while Mylor has a scroll with magic missiles. So yeah, all very usable. They are generally, does it tell you level? All listed characters are 1st level. They're decent 1st level characters, usually decent HP, And obviously they've all got magic items at first level, so they're kind of there in a tournament format, you know, to get you just going, so you're not having to say, okay, well, I've established the players with the one adventure where they, you know, they're fighting the rats in the basement sort of thing. So yeah, there are two things to praise, two major things. One is just three things. Let's say three big things to praise. It is a very good module. One, it is, let's just say, the immaculate atmosphere, and the way you're like, here's a cool haunted house with a mystery behind it. The mystery is it's fake. There's smugglers. There's all kinds of side areas. There's a secret laboratory. Okay, the next thing is, you're boarding a pirate ship, and the pirate ship, has secret areas, and they're smuggling to lizard men. It's, all got a very strong aesthetic and vibe and feels good. The second thing is the design elements are consistently excellent. They are just consistently excellent. There's so many things when you are reading stuff, and you if you DM a lot, I think it's tough. If you don't DM loads, you'll intuit some of this stuff when you're reading adventures, but it's something you really know when you're running regularly, when you're writing regularly. Even if you're reading something that's better than anything you could write, usually I am reading stuff that's better than the stuff I can write. But the point is, you're like, I wish they'd done that, because I can see the fact that this is going to not have much attention to it, or there needs to be a better reward to this, or I want this to challenge players in a particular way. I know how players are going to react to this, or not react, in fact. So you get that, whereas here, even though there's certainly conventions which not everyone likes, a bunch of stuff gated behind secret doors, some of which you might be able to find, some you won't. There's kind of a bit of a ramp up where the upper levels of the house are sort of just whatever, and then you go, they're good in virtually every respect, but they're not as, they're only mildly challenging. The big risk is not going to be getting attacked by 4 goblins. Then you go downstairs, and then it all just goes potentially crazy if you're detected early, which you probably will be. Guy tries to kill you, probably. There's a guard who might spot you, and there's a way that you might not be spotted by the guard, and that's really clever, but you might be. And then there's a secret, you've got to get through a secret door to go to a place, and there's a bunch more enemies. And that's just the first half. And so it very much explodes into and including with an illusionist, it's a very dangerous situation. There's gnolls there as well. So yeah. It's something not everyone will like, those conventions, but that's not bad design. It is a convention of a kind of adventure. I think so. First, I say the vibes, the aesthetic, this is fun, this feels good. Second, the design elements. It is just consistently strong and knows what it's doing. And third, I think the execution. That's correct. I don't mean the execution of the design, the execution of the book. The fact informationally is really good. The fact it just tells you stuff and says and there's a few things I'm like, I need to make sure I cross-reference what item from Sandblatt is connecting to this parchment, and then how I explain that to the players, because it has like the code on it. Because that could lead, the point is it could lead to the players being able to trick the pirates into coming closer, or receiving a boat from them, or something like that, because they can return the right signal. So anyway, the point is that within reason, with the permanent caveat, look, maybe this one thing could be slightly better, or okay, I'm going to have to make sure I do that. Informationally, it's presented so well, and I think, even in the context of, very good early modules, which are on the whole held to be very good, it has better discipline. It gives you orders of battle. G1, which is a great module, one of my favourites, does not. So you get the point, is that it's just very easy to use. It fits into the category, and it's no bad thing having it. It's one of the classic low-level adventures for a reason, and if you want to come up with your canon of those to start a campaign with, it's going to be a good one. But I think, that's just a small caveat is, look, if you're looking for something where there's a lot of competition, even amongst early TSR modules, stuff at levels 1 to 2 is there. And that's natural that they publish a lot of stuff for it. But, how much of that do you need? You're going to have to make a judgment. However, it does fit into a bigger plot if you want it to. And it's you can set it into stuff that, if you want to have it in a more dynamic sandboxy world, it can fit in well into an area in Greyhawk or wherever else, but in Caeland. I highly recommend, and I would love to hear what you think in the comments about U1, U2, U3, and the rest of the UK modules. Till next time.